And so with that, it is 7:03, and I do like to be mindful of time. And so I will go ahead and get started. Celeste Cuffy here of Life Empowered Consulting Services, where our mission is to reach, empower, and motivate others to access and utilize their God-given, their natural, their inherent talents and skills, building better families, companies, and communities worldwide. Thank you so much for joining me on this evening. I know this is the holiday season. I know that we are wrapping gifts or not. I know that we are spending time with family, hopefully, at least talking to them if we can't spend time in person with them, but doing things that we recognize are most important during this evening. And part of that is doing things that is valuable to us, such as self-care. As we are pouring out, I know that this is a season, and I've said it time and time again, it's been a tough year as a whole. But during this season specifically, I know that we spend a lot of time pouring out and giving and thinking of others. And I wanted to just take a little bit of time for us so that we could do that very same for ourselves, to pour into ourselves. And so that is kind of the genesis of this call tonight, so close to Christmas. And with that said, what we'll be talking about on this evening is 8 gifts to give yourself during this holiday season. What are 8 gifts that you can give yourself this holiday season? Now, one of the things that I did not say, and I want to make sure that I highlight this about these gifts, is that these gifts are not free. They will cost you something. But the time that we're going to spend tonight is free. But understand that if you decide to give yourself any of these gifts, it will cost you something. And so I just wanted to just make sure, right up front that you are aware of that. I do want to start off by sharing a story with you. In in Thailand, there have been several reports about elephants and how they treat elephants. And there is something that's actually called crushing. And this method is an approach or a method that's used to train elephants. And what they do is they take these elephants while they're babies, 3 years old, 3 to 6 years old, and they take them away from their mom. So these are wild elephants, and they capture them and they put them in these cages or large stalls, and they tie them with ropes to keep the elephants from moving. And when I say to keep them from moving, I mean literally keep them from moving, unable to kick, raise, swing its head, or anything. So complete restraint is what they do to these elephants. And the premise behind this activity is to crush the elephant's spirit. Now, we think about a rough day, and God knows that we've had some. But the time frame that they talk about where they're going through this process, they're putting these babies through this process, is anywhere from 6 months to a year. So could you imagine having your all of your limbs in full restriction for that amount of time? And not only that, with that separation, they are now not only are they restricted, being tied up and bound up, but they're also being abused. And so people will literally go up to the elephants and they would just abuse them. They have a tool called a bull hook, which is basically a long stick with some points on the end, and they're beating the elephants with it. What are they doing? They're beating the elephants into subjection. And they do this with the elephants at a small age. And why is, or at a young age rather. And why is that important to know? Because some of the things, some of the decisions, some of the behaviors that we as humans we employ today is a direct result of some of the things that we've experienced in our infancy, and not just infancy in our age, but infancy in our careers, infancies on our job, infancies in that relationship, in that marriage, and some of these behaviors when we were in our purest state at the onset of them. there's been some abuses. And now we're trying to figure out, is this our norm, or is this unnatural, or how are we going to proceed one way or the other? And why do I start with this? Because you understand the sheer size and weight and strength of an elephant. But because it was injured at such a young age, because its spirit was crushed at such a young age, that when it gets to full adult, full capacity, full strength, full power, it doesn't even know it because it's still operating as if it was that infant. And so, what I wanted to talk to you about today is, again, those 8 gifts that you can give to yourself. And I'm going to give you the gifts, but they are not in any particular order, okay? But the first one that I'm going to share with you is acceptance. And I start out with kind of a rough story, because whatever your yesterday was, whatever your hour ago was, whatever your 15 minutes ago was, we can't do anything about that now. And so we have to accept that as it is. The things that we cannot control, we cannot control. But what we can do is say, I can accept that because now here is my starting point moving forward. And so part of this that we have to understand is that the abuse that the elephant took as a toddler in full restraint, as a full adult walking free, doesn't have to take that abuse, but it doesn't know it doesn't have to. And so the next thing that I want us to understand is that we have to be okay with giving ourselves permission. So 1 is acceptance, 2 is permission. Permission to try new things. Maybe it didn't work last year, but maybe it'll work this year. Maybe I wasn't strong enough to navigate that situation a year ago, 5 years ago, 15 years ago. But what have you grown? How have you grown? How have you evolved? How have you matured? That same situation that you could not handle 15 years ago, 20 years ago, you now can not only handle it, but you can handle it with strength and vigor. And so you have to give yourself permission, though, to try new things, to be open to new possibilities, to be okay to be human. That maybe you did make that mistake. Maybe it didn't go the way that you planned it, but that's okay. You get to live again. You get to try again. And don't be afraid to do so. Now, sidebar is fear, and that's not even one of the 8, but I know that that's a real thing that we sometimes have to contend with and deal with, is our fear of not moving forward. And what I say to that is, think it through. What's the worst that can happen? What's the worst that can happen if it didn't work, if it doesn't work? It may not be as bad as we think. It just may give us the information, the tools to course correct, to do something different, to try again, but that's okay. So don't be afraid to try. Give yourself permission to be human. The next thing that I want to talk about is volume. I think I asked on social media a couple days ago, if you had a theme song, what would it be? And I got a lot of really great songs. Work, 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 work. Sometimes I feel like that's my song too. Someone else said, all I do is win, 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 no matter what. That feels good. That's not always how I feel, but that was his song, so I'm gonna let him have it. Someone else said testimony, I'm coming out, roar. Sometimes you have to lose to win again. Isn't that something? And then someone else said the battle is the Lord's. And this is just a few of all of the songs that I received asking about what their theme songs was. But think about the volume. There are days when whatever your theme song is, it can just play subtly behind you and you can hear it just as clear and well. There are other days that you want to have it on full blast, 10 decibels, and you can still hear it just as well. And when we talk about our own volume, we have to know when to turn up and when to turn down. Because when we are interacting with other people, this is the gift. Some people may not be able to hear your gift if your volume is too loud. They can't make out the words. And some people may not be able to hear your gift if you're whispering. Now you, because it's your theme song, it's your volume, you know exactly what you're saying, but that doesn't mean the audience does. It doesn't mean the person that you're interacting with does. So your other gift, your gift number 3 is recognizing your own volume and using it accordingly. So how will you use your voice? How will you use your volume? There are some people that are loud and boisterous, and it works. And then there are people that are very quiet. I've been able to sit in rooms and lead discussions. And I remember this one in specific because it had to be about 20 people in the room, and I was facilitating a discussion. And there was this one particular young lady. She never raised her voice. She never escalated. She never had an aggressive tone. And this wasn't a work environment. I wouldn't have expected that anyway. But when she began to speak, people heard her. And we all leaned in because we wanted to hear what she was saying. So the other piece of this volume that we have to think about is not only how loud or how low is it, but what are we saying? Are we saying things that people want to hear? How are we edifying? Now, and I love her because I think she's an opposite of me. I feel like I have my voice is a louder voice. So I don't think I will ever particularly be the quiet one. But nevertheless, I respect and I honor those people that have contrary gifts or different gifts, and we can still get the same end result of success. And I see a question here, is volume and volume different? There are 2 types of volume. And it looks like when it was put in here initially, it may have just been incorrectly spelled. But I think that, Brenda, you bring up a good point of volume also representing your capacity. And sometimes if we have a limited capacity and we're letting out a lot at once, then we run out of things to say quickly of value. So we also have to be mindful of that volume as well. And so we've talked about acceptance, we've talked about volume, and we've also talked about permission. Let's also talk about awareness. So my dad says this all the time, and I love to share this with others. He says, lie to anybody else, but don't lie to yourself. And I think about that time and time again, because we have to be honest about ourselves with ourselves. And I'm always impressed at how well we can look at other people and diagnose them and critique them and understand exactly what their problem is. But we don't do that for ourselves. And I don't know if it's because we're not attentive, or I've heard Bishop Jake say that when we see outward, it's easier than seeing inward, and I'll go with that. But whatever the case is, we have to learn how to be honest with ourselves about ourselves. And so that takes you to that self-awareness about ourselves, takes us into emotional intelligence, right? So now we can identify what we're feeling, why we're feeling, what triggered the feeling, and then how to handle it. And when we become self-aware, then we also can become more socially aware. And when we become self-aware and socially aware, that's now knowing how you feel and why you feel, how they feel. And now we can say, how do we manage that? How do we manage those emotions? I have a girlfriend who recently passed away, who said, do not make permanent decisions based on temporary situations. And so, how many decisions are we making that are permanent based on how we're feeling, what we're thinking, what we're experiencing in that moment? And so, we have to work on our own awareness. The other thing about awareness, too, I just want to point out, there's a term called the spotlight effect. And what the spotlight effect does is that it gives you the perspective, it gives you the impression that more people are focused on you than the reality. So, for example, if you had on a pair of pants, or for me, I'll use this for example. Whenever I eat, I always make a mess, but two, I always end up with something like in my teeth, a piece of garlic or something green, spinach or whatever. And I will have had whole conversations with people and they will have never said a thing. And then I start to think like, hey, I know you saw this. Why would you let me walk around like this and interact with a room full of people and I have, a piece of spinach stuck in my teeth? And I think everyone saw it and didn't see it, didn't say anything. But the reality really could be they weren't paying it any attention. They didn't see it. I saw it. And so the spotlight effect, again, gives you the impression that people are more attentive to you than they really are. And I like this in specific because a lot of times, kind of going back to that fear or going back to our own acceptance and even the permission, a lot of times we don't do because we have a perspective or a perception of what other people are perceiving of us. So then we don't move because they will say, they will do, they will go. Let's change. This gift is your awareness about you. And that spotlight is not what we think it is. So that's the next one. I see it's biblical. One can see the splinter in your eye, but not the log in theirs. Absolutely. Latoya, your pops is on the money, as the young people say. The young people are saying that now. Nothing is new under the sun. They were saying that a long time ago. How about that? So that is awareness. The next thing I want to talk about is value streams. Value streams is two parts. It's value and the streams, right? And so when you think about your own value, what is your value? How many of us are comfortable in assessing our own value? How many of us really know at some level what our worth is? Those elephants, they don't recognize they're elephants. They don't recognize their worth. But do you recognize what your value is? And if you do recognize your value, if you don't, go through the activities of thinking about what makes you important, what makes you, and not important to me, not important to other people, what makes you important to you? What makes you important to God? What makes you unique? Go through that due diligence. Answer those questions for yourself. And then the next part of that is the stream. Can the stream of your value be reflected? Can we see that in your job? Can we see that in your home? Can we see that everywhere you go? Those things that make you valuable. Can it be reflected? Is it reflected everywhere you go? Now, full transparency, I know that there are going to be people, places, things, situations that make uh, this difficult, because sometimes it's like I'm not putting on my best, I'm not doing my best, I'm not showing up my best for so and so or this situation or that situation, because they're not going to appreciate it, they're not going to recognize it, they're not going to celebrate it. But the thing is that we consistently say we're not going to dim our light. And so we're not dimming our light, then our values should be streaming everywhere we go. So it's important that we make sure that we understand our value. And again, not the value to other people, the value to you and the value to Christ. And from there, make sure that it's flowing. Where is it streaming? Is it reflected in all of your value streams? So the next one that I have is your goal. I want to talk about your goals. It's so important that we set goals. I know that those of you that know me, I'm a bit of a planner, and so I'm always trying to think ahead of what those big goals are going to be in the year. What are the big things, right? Um, but if we don't spend any time doing those daily small activities, we'll never get to accomplishing those big things, right? So if you want to go on a big trip, if you want to go on a trip, you have to save so many dollars a month, so many dollars, however way you have to budget it, you have to plan out. So those are the small things. It's the means to the end that will help you achieve your goals. And so what I like to do is something that I just say 3 things daily, right? And for me, it's 6 things. So it's 3 things in my day job, and then there are 3 more things in my home life that I just want to accomplish in the course of that day. So for me, it's 6 things that I want to accomplish. I don't care on my day job if I got a list of 20 things I have to do. I need to prioritize to what 3 things am I going to get done today. Everything else I get done is gravy, but there are 3 things in the course of this day that I need to get done. And so I make a to-do list. I live by to-do lists. Um, Sidebar, there's a lot of data supporting the most successful people that you will find will be people that use to-do lists. But so for me, I have my to-do list, I make a list, and then I highlight my top 3. In my home, once I think about in the morning, what do I want to have? What 3 things do I want to have done? Okay, I want to have the kitchen clean, I want to have the laundry done, and whatever else. Oh, dinner, I guess I should cook too. So those would be my 3 things. And so, but set those goals for yourself. And, there are tons of apps that speak about vision boards that you can do them online. You can use Pinterest to create them. Use a spreadsheet. I use a spreadsheet that I have a spreadsheet that I use to set goals. I can send that to you guys. If you, I will send you an email. Those of you that registered, I'll have your email. I'll send that over to you as well, just to use. It's just a simple spreadsheet. But whatever it is, to put what you're trying to accomplish in this year, in the next year, whatever that is, write it down. And I must tell you that for me, on my spreadsheet, I even have down to drinking 64 ounces of water a day. Because I know that's a goal. Now, I don't always make it now. I don't always make it, but I do set the goal. And then I work towards it. And so that is what we want to do, is set these goals and achieve them. And then once you see yourself, and I like the 3 things because um, once you see yourself doing these small things, doing those bigger things will feel more attainable. So when we go back to giving yourself permission, a lot of times we'll say, I can't do that, but I want to do that. And it's, well, why can't you? You absolutely can. You absolutely can do it. Why? Because when you begin to look back over your history, when you begin to look back over your experiences and all of the things that you were able to overcome, all of the things that you were able to accomplish, why can't you accomplish this? Absolutely, yes, you can. And sometimes we have to have that reminder to ourselves. There's a strategy, and it's called the 5 whys. And so I encourage everyone to do this. If there is something that you want to do and immediately you have disqualified yourself from doing it, ask yourself why 5 times. So pretend like you're that 3-year-old or 4-year-old or 5-year-old that asks why until it's annoying. But allow that to help you get to the root cause of your decision of why you can't do something. And I guarantee you, if you are honest with yourself in your awareness, once you begin to drill down, very, very likely you will be able to do it, but you will have to do some other things to make it happen. You'll have to make some different decisions. The next thing that I want to talk to you about is proximity. Now, those of you who have my book, The Risk to Be Great, I talk about 3 different types of people that you need to have in your space. And guess what? I still believe it, right? And here are these 3 types. You have to have that called person, you have to have that committed person, and you have to have that complimentary person. That called person is more of your mentor. This is someone that, even though they may not be trying to do exactly what you're doing, they're further ahead of you. And so they've done something in parallel or well above. And so they are really just trying to help you get there. They are called to you. There's that person that's complimentary to you. That is kind of like your BFF. So they're loyal to you. They're going to support you in your task, whether it is to, I don't know, cure a cancer or walk dogs. Whatever your decision is, that person is with you every step of the way. That is your loyal person. That is the committed person. The complimentary person is the person that is, they're going to get something out of whatever you're getting, whatever you're doing. Meaning that whatever you guys are doing is mutually beneficial. And so I often use, for an example, if you are singing a song, this is the person that is working the sound. There is going to be a benefit for them. If they are serving you in some sort of way, there's going to be a paycheck on the back end. There's going to be marketing. There's going to be a plug. There's going to be something on the back end for you. And so that is that complimentary person, because they are doing something because they know that they're going to get something in return. And the question then, when we talk about proximity, is who's in your space? Who's close to you? Who's around you? The next question to that, though, when you think about it, they say that you make up the 5 closest people to you, right? But now, if you are an average of the 5 people that's closest to you, and let's just say hypothetically, you are the smartest one in that 5 people, you are the most successful one in the 5 people, you are the most thought-provoking one in that 5 people, then how are you growing? Proximity doesn't always mean you have to be in their immediate space, but are you at least in eyes view? Can you see how the CEO of the company is operating? Can you have a conversation every now and again? Are you watching speakers and presenters, and are you going through training scenarios or opportunities so that you can, I saw someone posted earlier today on Facebook, God is enlarging my territory. How are you enlarging your territory? How are you creating space so that your territory can be enlarged? So proximity, who's around you and who are you around? Who's around you and who are you around? And then Just for fun, go through the 5 whys. Why? Because this is a gift that you can give yourself. This is the gift of getting around people who can stretch you, who can give you alternative ways of thinking that can challenge your mindset. And I've been graced to be in a lot of those spaces. And you know what? After being in some of those spaces, I'm like, nope, yep, I'm good. What I believe is what I believe in. And I think I'm pretty sure I'm still right. So I'm going to let them have that. But what it also does is it still opens my horizons. And when we talk about emotional intelligence, when we talk about social awareness, being in those spaces gives you a different understanding as to why. Because everyone hasn't been raised the way that you've been raised. Everyone hasn't worked in the same venues as you've worked. So there are some experiences that they bring to the table, and there are some experiences that you bring to the table. And how else will you learn what those are? Unless you get into proximity, unless you're reading. I have a friend that says, readers are leaders. Leaders are readers. What are we listening to? What are we reading? What are we getting in close proximity to? It's important, it's critical that we do that. And the last thing, we're actually making really, really good time. I appreciate this. And thank you again all for joining me. And the last one that I have though is, I'll share in just a second, but let me just do a really quick walkthrough again. Again, in no particular order, but we talked about acceptance, and acceptance giving you a starting point. Recognizing what we can control, what we can't control, allowing us to forgive ourselves, allowing us to embrace our humanity, really. We talked about our volume and how we're going to use our voice. How do we turn up? Or how do we turn down so that those that are in our audience, they can hear appropriately. They can clearly hear the messages that we are trying to convey. And what are we filled with in terms of volume? What is our capacity to use our voice? What is our capacity to use the volume, the dial? And so that was volume. We talked about awareness in terms of being honest with ourselves, about ourselves. We talked about the spotlight effect. Just a quick reminder as we are moving forward that we probably think people are paying more attention than they really are. We talked about goals. We want to make sure that we are always very intentional about what we want to achieve. Through doing things such as the 3 things daily, 6 things for me, vision boards, spreadsheets, pictures, whatever you feel like you need to do, please do it so that you can achieve your goals. We talked about the 5 whys, asking yourself, especially when it comes to the goals, if we ever get to the point where we say we can't, when we talk about giving ourselves permission, and that was the 5th one, giving ourselves permission. And we talk about why we can't, just asking ourselves why. Why can't we? 5 times. Why and why and why? Why can't I go back to school? Well, why not? Well, because I don't have time. Do you not have time? Why don't you have time? Because I have family and kids. Okay. And why else? Why can other people do it and you can't do it? And just keep asking yourself why. Why do you think it's impossible for you, but it seems to be possible for others. Just keep asking yourself why. Then we talked about permission, to be open to possibilities, to be human, to make mistakes, to live. I have a colleague that just went to Cabo San Lucas this past weekend, and he sent me pictures. He went scuba diving, and I thought, I want to do that. Now, I've been to Cabo, and I've been exactly where he was, but I was on a boat. Um, why did I not even think about scuba diving? Because that requires me to come outside of my comfort zone is why. And that's my truth. Why? Because I am being honest with myself about myself. And that would require me to come out of my comfort zone. Value streams. We talked about your value, recognizing your value, my value, recognizing my value, and making sure that it's streaming through every facet of my life, everything that I do, every job that I touch, every community, every company, team that I interact with. Is my value being reflected? Is it in the stream? Is it flowing through me? We talked about proximity, the types of people that are in our spaces that call that complimentary and that committed person. And and then I also talked about the fact that people don't have to be in close proximity for us to learn from them. The other thing that I wanted to add to that is that we don't always have to be in people's, and I guess this reinforces my point, we don't have to be in people's intimate space to learn. You can see a drunk man on the street and make a very conscious decision that that is not the life, the experience, or the moment that you want to have, and make different decisions. I remember some years ago, myself and a bunch of friends, we had all went out to dinner and had a really good time. And on our way out, there was a young lady, probably a college student, and she was on the ground, um, um, very inebriated, and just ridiculous. And I have a friend that is super compassionate. But what was crazy was that her friends had just kind of left her. So I don't know if that was a thing that she did all the time. I don't know. But we like kind of stood around like, who's going to help her? Is she okay? All of that. But that was a lesson for me. I don't ever have to get drunk to know that that's not what I want to do. And so again, we need to have a eye shot view of it, but we don't have to be particularly intimate to learn some of these lessons that life is trying to teach us. And then the last thing, and I wanted to just walk through that really quickly again, but the last thing that I want to talk about is choice. And I kind of alluded to this a little bit when I was sharing about going to Cabo for scuba diving and going outside of my comfort zone. I heard Stephen Furtick say this, and this just really, really resonated with me. He said, we choose, oftentimes we choose the familiar over God's favor. So I'm going to say that again. We choose the familiar over God's favor. So what does that mean? That means we want these new things, but new things are new. New things will take us out of our comfort zone. New things will make us experience unfamiliar things. We say we want new. We want the new thing. We want the enlarged territory is new territory. It's new to us. And when those opportunities arise, we are choosing our safety. We are choosing the familiar rather than the unfamiliar, which essentially means that we are saying no to God's favor. And that just really resonated with me because we have a choice. And all of 7 of these other things that we've discussed, we have a choice. We can choose to accept or not. We can choose to manage our volume or not. We can choose to set goals. We can choose to give ourselves permission or not. These are all choices. And that lies with us. And if there was one gift out of all 8 of these, now I want you to take of the 8, I want you to take what resonates most with you and choose to make decisions as a result of it. But if there was one that all of these anchor upon, it's the choice. And so we have to be mindful that it is our decision whether or not we're going to choose the familiar or the favor. And Elise, you're right. The new thing bringeth forth fear of the unknown. But if it's a new thing from Him, this is where our faith should kick in. I'll tell you, over these last couple of years, it has just been a whirlwind, and the wind is still whirling. And, as much as I am a planner, I get the question of, well, what are your goals? What are you planning to do next year? And I am saying, I really don't know. I don't know how this is going to work out. I am just stepping out by faith. And that is what we have to do. But that's our choice. That is a choice because it requires different behaviors. It requires us to step into unknown and unfamiliar. Absolutely. So those were my 8 gifts that I believe that you can give yourself this holiday season.